Rochelle Mahoney was born in Ireland during the year of 1987. She grew up in the 1990s in Dublin, where she became keenly aware of her family's fighting history. Her family tree had soldiers planting their roots in several conflicts throughout Irish history, including plenty of modern-day scraps with other locals. At some point in her late teens or very early 20s, Mahoney had already begun referring to herself as Clover. She came across Jim Hawksworth, future Payday Gang member Hoxton. Unaware that he was already a more experienced criminal, Clover attempted to perform a pigeon drop scam on him. This is the type of fraud where the scammer attempts to convince their victim to give them some money under the pretense of getting more back in a very short window. However, the victim will never see their money again or any return on their investment. Hawksworth, knowing a thing or two about a thing or two, saw what was going on and called her bluff. However, admiring the confidence in which she attempted the scam, he took her under his wing. The two pulled a string of heists together across the UK before Clover's grand double cross. The two were on a job to steal a truck full of L-90 rifles headed to the British military. Clover left Hoxton behind, flipping him off as he drove away with the truck and the rifles. She sold all but one, which she kept for herself as her signature Queen's Wrath rifle in Payday 2 as a way to remember Hoxton. Hoxton harbored no ill will towards her and was proud of her stunt, considering it a graduation from his criminal teachings. We don't know exactly how long Clover spent in Hoxton's tutelage or when it occurred, but we know they went their separate ways before Hoxton joined the Payday Gang for their formation in 2011. Clover's first on-record job after joining the gang was breaking her mentor out of police custody on October 27, 2014. In real life, Clover was not yet released or playable at this time. However, she was featured in advertising for the game and DLC the month before. Later on, pictures in Hoxton Revenge and documents in Dragon's Files for Payday 3 both confirm her to have been there as well. It's a pretty big deal to retcon a character's first appearance and go, it was actually months earlier, but you didn't know or have access to it. But we do know that Clover was canonically present for Hoxton Breakout. The mask she donned was not one of a clown, but rather of a woman caped with makeup and a surgically altered face. This was chosen by Clover herself as a parody of her hatred for the concept of taking extreme modifications to your body for the sake of appearances. As part of the gang, she helped fight through the streets of DC to escort the truck holding Hoxton. After the gang was clear and free of the police, they stormed the FBI headquarters to find as much evidence as possible on the gang and use it to figure out who was the informant that got Hoxton arrested. The informant's identity was too heavily protected, forcing the gang to retreat with just a few DNA samples. 2 months later, on December 2nd, Clover joined the gang for the White Xmas heist in the woods north of DC. They all sang a jaunty tune on the way up to rescue Hajruddin, Vlad's brother-in-law who was an avid pilot and raging alcoholic. Hajruddin had crashed his plane in the forest, raining cocaine throughout the woods. The gang first helped him up the hill from the crash site, and then loaded him into Biles' chopper for him to be flown back to Vlad. As the gang waited for their own escape to return, they bundled up as much of the fallen cocaine as they could before piling in and escaping. Less than 2 weeks later, Clover regaled the gang with the tale of the Diamond, before joining them as they snuck through the Andersonian Museum on the evening of December 15th, 2014. The gang infiltrated through the building's basement and worked their way through the halls, disabling security from the preceding halls to unlock the exhibit for the Diamond. After cracking the grand gate, the crew came to a pressure-sensitive floor between them and the Diamond. One heister popped the security panel open to reveal the hidden path across, while the other scuttled across the tiles to reach the end without sounding the alarm and revealing tear gas. Said heister swiped the diamond, and the gang snuck off into the night. 3 months later, on March 18th, 2015, the car shop job took place. Now, it's debatable whether Clover was canonically present for this one. She was in the live-action trailer advertising this heist. However, The live-action trailer was deleted and shown almost 2 years later in snippets of deleted footage due to varying drastically from the actual heist. In the trailer, Dallas and Clover crash the Payday van as they escape from another job and engage in a firefight with police before escaping in a car stolen from a nearby dealership. In the actual game, however, this heist was strictly stealth only, rendering the scenario from the trailer completely impossible. If Clover was present for this, she joined the other heisters in infiltrating the dealership, and then found the IT worker's computer to hack open the storage room containing the keys to nearby sports cars. Those keys bursted out of the dealership and into an underground highway tunnel that the gang had rigged to blow, and then the cars were loaded onto a shipping container and sent off to their buyers. Fast forward to June 25th of that year, and the gang was off to Las Vegas for their robbery of the Golden Grin Casino. As confirmed by Dragon's files in Payday 3, this is indeed a heist Clover was present for. The gang entered the casino and got their hands on C4, which they used to blow up the gambling tables and reveal the ceiling of the vault. From here, they used fireworks to summon a blimp carrying the BFD, or the Big Fucking Drill. It's not actually a drill, but a giant plasma cutter designed by Sokol. As the gang opened the skylight barrier, Bile dropped a winch for them to pull the BFD into place. Bada bing, bada boom, this eventually cut into the vault after a lot of power pulling and coolant refilling. The gang was shocked to find the dentist's super secret Illuminati box as his main objective, but they yoinked it along with whatever else they could carry and made their grand exit. The next heist we have Clover's presence confirmed for is the Undercover heist on February 11th, 2016. Once again, this is written in the Payday 3 Dragon files. Now this appears to retcon the original Payday the Heist version, which was also the first appearance of the CrimeNet map, but I digress. In this heist, Clover and the Payday Gang used an abandoned, dilapidated apartment building to lie in wait as Eugene Sturr, the taxman, tried to sell a hard drive full of IRS info to some criminals. However, it was a sting operation, and the police closed in on him. The taxman was not rescued, but rather placed under new management, as the gang called in their old pilot Alex to grab the taxman's limo with a crane and drop it onto the building. They cut him out of the limo with a saw, brought him to their epic gamer room, and tied him up for on-the-spot interrogation, gentle persuasion, and hacking. After using his credentials to log into the IRS system, the gang did some sick rooftop parkour to make their grand escape via helicopter. That was the last heist Clover was confirmed to take part in for several months. However, on October 8th, she earned a promotion. As the gang moved into their new safe house, Clover became their head of surveillance and security. She joined the leadership office on the second floor where Dallas and Hoxton made the group's plans. This step up for Clover signified the group's trust in her, as they neared her second anniversary with the gang, while she was permitted to be in the earshot of their main minds. A month later, on November 4th, Clover and the other heisters had an episode of group psychosis. They had a collective prison nightmare where they battled through an abandoned prison island. They spun wheels to get rewards and determined what negative effects would befall them, brought about by the giant evil Necrocloaker. As the gang overcame all of this, they stole the Cloaker's gold and made their dream escape. However, all the while, the gang are plagued with voices of their past and terrifying possible futures. Voices that Clover hears are another Irish woman, presumably her mother. Her first line simply mentions, "They're all dead," implying many people Clover knew are gone, or she's worried about that fate for the Payday Gang. Her other line is simply, "Rochelle, what are you doing?" This was the first time Clover's first name was identified to the players. On April 4th, 2017, Clover was among the many members of the Payday Gang brought to New York as they chased Matt Roscoe. In 2011, the gang robbed an embassy of critical documents with Matt's assistance, only for him to betray them and unsuccessfully flee through the busy city streets. In Payday 2, the gang ambushed him in that same embassy and he fled down the same streets. Bane even pointed out how absurd it was to be chasing Matt in the same place again. Because Matt is an empty-headed dumb fuck who doesn't learn from his mistakes, he crashed his car in the same spot. Once again, the Payday Gang closed in, this time with close to a dozen members present. They lit a fire to force Matt out of his car, but he bartered for his safety with knowledge of Jiro's son Kento, as well as another group that was intent on destroying the Payday Gang. The gang, deciding to pick his brain about this later, escorted him between SWAT turrets and up the hill to Biles' waiting chopper. Matt was then left in Jacket's care at the safe house. 6 months later, on October 23, 2017, Clover was part of the Alaskan deal heist. Although initial advertising materials such as comics and promo sites only depicted the original gang, those pesky Dragon files once again placed her here canonically. The gang took a train all the way from DC to Alaska with the intent of being the neutral party to provide oversight of a weapons deal between Locke and the Butcher's gunrunners. However, the police ambushed the train as Locke had sold out the deal to the FBI. The gang retakes the Butcher's ship and rescued the crew before refueling the boat and proceeded to escape with as many weapons as they could carry. This would eventually be revealed to be a ruse put together by Bane and Locke to get Locke and the gang out of DC for a bit as the Kataru closed in, while making it appear as though Locke had cut ties. Now onto 2018. Although released in the early 2020s, Fall 28 is when the Texas Heat campaign takes place. I asked Starbreeze if they knew when and where it is exactly, but there is no date. They told me it was written in a way where it could take place at any point between Shacklethorne Auction, which was August 15th, and the beginning of Locke's Big Week, which canonically started on October 26, 2018. That gives us just over a 2-month window, and Texas Heat canonically lives anywhere in there. So what is Texas Heat? Well, as the main gang was busy planning their final battle with Murkywater, Locke found an opportunity to grow Crime.net. Enter Blaine Keegan, a businessman and gun runner who was looking to move up in the world and enter the oil trade. However, his rival, Alice Rainey, controlled not only her own criminal enterprise, but the Sarah Corporation, the leading players in the oil trade. Both stood in Keegan's way, so he turned to CrimeNet for help. Locke sent Clover, Sangres, Bonnie, and Jiro on a trip to Texas so they could sort it all out. Upon arrival, they were contacted by Gemma McShay, Keegan's subordinate. She first sent the team to Midland Ranch. This was a large farmhouse and ranch estate run by Rainey's lieutenant, Esteban Santiago, who had become a major threat to Gemma's own smuggling operation. Rather than being used for livestock or farming, though, the entire place was a workshop building guns and rifles for sale. The gang first stormed into Esteban's house and stole his laptop. After decrypting the info on it, they moved over to the barn. They made a few rifles using the parts on site, stole their newly crafted loot, and destroyed the workbenches. Most importantly of all, Esteban was killed in the commotion as the Payday Gang made their escape. As Rainey's organization was reeling from Midland Ranch being knocked out of commission, Gemma hit up the heisters with another unrelated job. The Lost in Transit heist sent the team to a nearby military train depot with the goal of stealing some valuable printing plates. Upon arrival, the gang entered the depot and detonated some piping to prevent the trains holding the plates from speeding off. With this done, they did some hacking to find out where exactly the plates are. They then cut into those train cars and popped the vaults. They tossed their loot into an unused locomotive, which was then moved via crane onto the one clear rail line. After some light maintenance on the engine, the gang climbed aboard and rode off into the Texas Heat. Hey, that's the name of the campaign! Anyway, with this impressive feat of stealing a train in modern day now complete, Keegan himself finally contacted his Texas team. He decided it was time to destroy Alice Rainey and the value of the Sarah Company on what should be the best night in the company's history. The hostile takeover heist sent the team into the Sarah Corporation's headquarters just as the media was gathering ahead of Sarah revealing their new invention. Their invention was a device called the Neo 2, a gadget which would drastically reduce pollution and emissions from oil usage, which would make Sarah the world's first eco-positive oil company. Keegan didn't want this to happen, so the gang had 3 goals in destroying the company that night. Number 1, find evidence and blackmail of criminal schemes between Rainey and her security chief, who was Esteban's brother, Gabriel Santiago. Number 2. Steal the Neo 2 before the media sees it or learns that it is made by Sarah. Number 3. Steal all research notes and information on the Neo 2 to eliminate proof that Sarah designed it. Then detonate and flood the underwater lab where it was manufactured to ensure that it can't be replicated. With all 3 of these goals completed, the gang escapes by helicopter with the notes and the device. This allowed Keegan Oil to bring the Neo 2 to market as their own device in their own time, as the entire world was busy discovering Alice Rainey's criminal deeds. As the FBI began investigating Rainey due to the crime of it all, Keegan sent the gang on their final mission for him. The crude awakening job saw them take a boat out to the Sarah Corporation's oil rig, where Gabriel Santiago himself was stationed. As their attack took place, the gang searched the labs for data on the purest oil in the area. They then manipulated some pipes and siphoned the oil to their nearby barge, leaving Keegan Oil a deluge of stock to get started as they came for Sarah's number 1 spot. Before leaving, the heisters went to set the giant oil drill to detonate, exploding the entire oil rig. There was one thing standing in their way, though. Gabriel was posted up in experimental murky water armor. It rendered him both bulletproof and fireproof. However, it lacked the capabilities to defend against both of these hazards at once. The gang lured him into pools of oil, which they then ignited, setting Gabriel ablaze so they could shoot him to death. From there, they set the drill to blow as planned and took a zipline back to their boat. They docked on the Keegan Oil barge to look on as the rig exploded, almost assuredly killing everyone on board. And just like that, the Payday Gang reached a new level of domestic terrorism they never dreamed was possible. I now have to explain what I refer to as Locke's Big Week. I hate it. It's the biggest clusterfuck of a timeline in Payday lore. Here we go. Hell's Island is the start of the week, which took place October 26, 2018. This week ends 5 days later on November 1st, 2018, when the White House heist released and brought Payday 2 to an official end. This is all well and good. However, after the collapse of Overkill's The Walking Dead brought Starbreeze to bankruptcy, they had to resort to making more Payday 2 DLC to fund the company until the release of Payday 3. For some reason, the writers decided that the first Revival-era campaign, a set of 4 heists, would start and run during that same 5-day window. They then did it again with the second Revival campaign. Even more baffling is that these heists are all in the same time zone, so a lot of them take place at the same time. Let me show you this diagram. To remind you of the starting date, Hell's Island took place off the coast of Northern Oregon on October 26, 2018. Hell's Island was a heist performed by what I'll refer to as Team 1. This group was comprised of Dallas, Hoxton, Duke, Chains, and Locke. Locke was not only running this heist on the radio, but he was physically on the ground carrying Bane. After Hell's Island, Team 1 returned to DC. On the same night as Hell's Island, Team 2 arrived in Southern California for the border crossing heist. Team 2, which was made of Sokol, Sydney, Sangres, and Clover, then performed the rest of the Silk Road campaign. Also on the same night, Team 3 arrived in San Francisco for the Dragon heist. With the combined might of Joy, Dragon, Bonnie, and Rust, Team 3 carried out the City of Gold campaign. If these things all started on the same day and branched out, it would be mildly acceptable, but we know the entire Payday Gang was present for the White House on November 1st, and that was the definitive end of the gang's adventures until 2023. So as a result of that, we have 10 or 11 heists happening across 2 countries in a 6-day window. This window narrows even further when we remember it's a 10-hour flight from San Francisco to DC, and due to customs, anywhere from 15 hours to 20 hours from Tijuana to DC. That means for both teams 2 and 3, there's at least a day of transit before the White House. It hurts my head. Why did they do it this way? Okay, bringing it back. We're obviously focusing on Team 2 for this video, because this is the Clover episode. This is the Clover one, and she was there. The evening of October 26th in Southern California, the team arrived at an Overkill MC clubhouse for the border crossing heist. These guys had a tunnel to an airfield in Mexico owned by Murky Water, and the two organizations were collaborating. The Heisters exterminated the biker gang and used breach charge stored within their sheds to bust open the tunnel. They took a car within a long distance to the airfield, and the sun had set by the time they arrived. At the airfield, their goal was to do as much to weaken Murky Water as possible before the coming showdown. They looted everything that wasn't nailed down from multiple Murky warehouses and killing dozens of their operatives. They also wiped a bunch of Murky uniforms, and that'll be important later. After filling a plane with their ill-gotten gains, the gang fueled the craft and detonated the airfield gate with C4. With the big boom sufficiently complete, they flew off to some other undisclosed area in Mexico. There is another heist in the Border Crossing DLC, called Border Crystal. It features the gang returning to the airfield to take over and make use of the meth lab that had been set up after Border Crossing. However, that takes place at night as well. The Silk Road campaign is very hectic with its timing, and unlike other heists, Border Crystal is never referenced again. I just don't see how it slots into the week, and I couldn't find anything even confirming it to be canon. I asked Starbreeze as well, and the people I spoke to weren't sure. With that in mind, I'm operating under the assumption that although Border Crystal was part of the same DLC, it is not canon since it jumbles an already impossibly stretched timeline even further. The next heist takes place on the afternoon of October 27th, the San Martin bank heist. Vlad joined Locke on the radio for this one, having convinced the gang to stop and hit this bank before returning to DC. However, before the gang could even enter, Hasrudin appeared, sent by Vlad. He rammed a specialized SUV through the front of the bank. The heisters rushed in and attached a winch on the car to the teller's booth before Hasrudin reversed, pulling the building asunder. The heisters then rushed in and took the local IT guy hostage. They forced him to disable the security system on the vault gate, allowing them in. Bile dropped the components for the Beast, making its grand return. Now, after a brief firefight, the gang went into the vault where they found Vlad's lost family heirlooms, almost a dozen cases of Romanov treasures. With this secured, they made their way to the van outside and finally prepared to head home. Or so they thought. The next morning, October 28th, the gang had some breakfast in Tijuana. That's the name of the heist. After ramming his car through the front of the San Martin bank, Hasrudin was arrested by the local police. The Payday Gang didn't want to leave their man behind, partially out of loyalty, but mostly because Vlad paid for his safe return. They stormed the police station and breached the evidence room, finding the newly filed evidence against Hasrudin. They burned the files and breached the station's armory to find a door breaker, which they used to open the security door to the cells. From there, it became a simple matter of finding the interrogation chamber holding Hasrudin and freeing him from his restraints. Having already learned the way, he guided the Payday Gang to the parking garage, where they stole back his SUV from the previous day's bank heist. They drove it out onto the front lot, and the whole gang piled in as Bile flew overhead and airlifted the car out of the station. On an undisclosed evening, either the 29th or the 30th, it was time for the gang to be the instruments of Vlad's revenge. It was revealed that Vlad's current enemy, a man named Bullock, was behind the Romanov treasure being locked in San Martin and tipped off the police on where they could arrest Hasrudin. The gang was sent to Bullock's mansion to kill him. They did this by entering the mansion during a costume party and trying to gain access to his office. After finding out they needed to solve a Mayan-inspired puzzle, the gang constructed a fertilizer bomb to open the secret door to Bullock's inner sanctum. While in there, they found the code and may or may not have released a shark, depending on who you ask. They entered the code for the door and shot Bullock as he pleaded for his life. As Bullock drowned in the waters beneath his mansion, the gang drilled his safe and stole a hard drive with all of his contacts and associates' info on it, before making their grand escape with some other additional treasure. On November 1st, having made their way back to DC, Clover, Sangres, Sokol, and Sydney provided the stolen Murky Water uniforms to the rest of the gang. Everyone used Locke's helicopter to fly to the White House, using those uniforms as a disguise. The Payday Gang infiltrated the White House before being discovered, and had to hack devices to open an RFID reader and open the West Wing. Once in there, they used some thermite to break their way into the Oval Office. They used a super duper drill that doesn't jam to open the presidential safe for a special keycard, which granted them access to the PIOC. Well in there, they hacked the mainframe, actual quote, to open the vault. Once within the vault, they stole a bunch of presidential pardons as a get-out-of-jail-free card for the Payday Gang. Maybe they did some other stuff, with demons, but that's just rumors. They escaped via helicopter with the pardons and were officially home free. The gang returned to Mexico and buried their masks, leaving a life of crime behind. Well, that was the plan anyway. Clover quickly got bored of a life without crime. She returned to Dublin and started a new criminal crew of young crooks. Her goal was to train them as Hoxton had trained her. However, this wasn't meant to last. In the summer of 2023, the assassins sent by the dastardly organization known as the Conspiracy came calling for Clover, as they did the entire Payday Gang. Clover survived by the skin of her teeth, but the rest of her new crew were not so lucky. All of her trainees were killed in the attack. In June 2024, Clover contacted an associate of Gage to make a custom Car 4 variant for her called the Queen's Revenge. Dragon caught wind of this, and dropped a note in her rifle shipment to call Hasruddin. From there, she got in touch with Vlad, who was able to reconnect her to the Payday Gang. She flew to New York to rejoin the gang on June 27th for the Boys in Blue heist. Whilst there, the gang walked directly in the front of a police station with a corrupt captain in charge. They completed two separate but simple operations. Number one was to steal some data by hacking into the station's server network and then permitting it to be transferred from the captain's office. Number two was to get into the back parking lot where some explosives had been stashed. The gang used those to blow open the wall to the evidence locker and then used a tow truck conveniently placed by Shade to pry the door off the locker itself. From there, they yoinked the keys to a police van and loaded it with Vlad's gold, which the police had initially taken to set this whole operation in motion. With the van loaded, they made their grand escape. Now, Starbreeze is very particular with who they include in trailers and marketing materials for Payday 3 heists, so it's pretty easy to track who is in which. Clover has not canonically appeared in any heists after Boys in Blue. A bit odd to bring back the fan-favorite character and then make her like a one-and-done in lore before sidelining her, but that does bring us to the end of the first episode of A Heister's Legacy. Now this is a new series we're doing that brings us all the way through a Payday character's entire story, every stone unturned from their first appearance to the time of the video's release. We really hope you enjoyed this one. Let us know which heister you want us to see next in the comments below. Until next time, don't forget to spread the happy and stay rusty.